Good afternoon, folks. We're just going to give everyone a chance to join. Thanks for being here today. Feel free to drop into the chat and let us know where you're joining from, what your business focuses on. My name's Jamie Proctor Boyce. I'm the head of growth here at Pocketed. There'll be a formal introduction momentarily from my colleague Abby here, but I'm joining you from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Anyone else in Halifax?
Have Sava from MRX Solutions Vancouver, another Stephanie from Vancouver. Um, in Toronto, our first Toronto. So Tiana, Toronto.
Um,
And my name is Abhishek Ram, or I go by Abby. I am the content marketing intern, and I'm just here to provide quick links and support to Jamie. Yeah.
awesome. So fun. So fun to see a Maritimer from New Brunswick. Hello from Saskatoon. I love Saskatchewan. I just have to say, I love you all, but I have a soft spot. Um, why don't you go ahead, Abby, and introduce Pocketed, and then I'll jump into our presentation.
All right. So hello, everybody. This is the Money Meets Machines webinar, and it's all about innovation AI. A little bit about Pocketed is that we help companies across North America access billions of dollars in grants. Since launching in 2021, we have more than 17,000 businesses that Pocketed has helped access over 200 million in government funding. So just a little intro, and let's just get straight into it. Jamie, our wonderful head of growth, will speak a little bit more on it.
Awesome. So thanks for being here, everyone. It's a pretty diverse group. We've got folks across the country, even people joining us from the US. Shout out to the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Oregon, so I do love Seattle. We are here to talk about how the government is really caring a lot about AI lately. And so folks in this webinar might be AI companies. You might be a non-tech company who's interested in adopting AI into your business. All of those are actually mandates really prioritized by the government right now. So I'm going to screen share. I'm going to walk us through a presentation, talks a little bit about grant funding in general, gets more specific with some AI programs, some thoughts that we have here at Pocketed, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A after my presentation. I do encourage folks to use the Q&A function, just a little housekeeping at the bottom in your toolbar. Abby's using the chat to just drop program links, how to access Pocketed software for free. But if you folks want to use the Q&A function, you can type in your question, and we'll again have a Q&A section at the end of the session, and then and Abby and I can help keep track of your questions there. All right, so without further ado, thanks to Abby and the marketing team for this cute title, Money Meets Machines. We are here really, though, to talk about grants. That money part is how do we fund more innovation in Canada? How do we fund artificial intelligence initiatives? So when we're building a project, whether it's a consortium or a business, there's lots of ways that sources, if you will, that money can come from. So capital might be the way you are bootstrapping your business. Maybe you have a service business and you're using the revenue from your service business to bootstrap a software venture. Maybe your software venture is got a really exciting story and you've been able to attract some equity investment. Debt is another way that folks fund their businesses, working with friends and family for loans, as well as banks and other alternative lenders. Grants, tax credits, and incentives are a pretty powerful way to take all of these sources of money, including revenue, which is, king or queen, the most important source of money when we're building a for-profit venture. But grants, tax credits, and incentives are a great way to take the capital that you've secured and make it last longer, essentially to recycle it. I always say that grants don't necessarily create runway, right? For most grants, you do have to have a matching contribution. So you can't go in with no money and no business traction and say, hi, I'd like a grant. But you absolutely, once you have some money from one of these sources, take that, present it as a matching contribution as part of a grant application, and really extend that runway that you built through other sources. So all the time, people wonder how much money's out there. It is $5.9 billion every year that the Canadian government gives back to the for-profit sector. So this metric is talking about for-profit grants. So that's our SHRED tax incentive. That's some of these new AI programs. It's hiring grants. There's a lot of money out there. And almost every day, my clients or my potential clients come and say, is my business grant fundable? And the reality is that grants don't really fund businesses. I mean, they do, right? But what a grant application is proposing is a project, our business activities. So the reality is that there is grant funding out there for almost every type of business. And again, what's exciting about some of this new AI funding that's coming out, and we see it from several different funders, is that it's supporting AI commercialization. So are you building AI technology? Or are you looking to adopt AI? You are not necessarily looking to be an AI firm yourself, but you're looking to bring in artificial intelligence in order to increase your efficiency, to improve your business operations. So really, it's all about the activity. You could be a tech company or a non-tech company. You could be a brick and mortar store or an e-commerce business. You could be offering professional services or working in ag. Regardless of what type of business you are, the critical thing is to think about what types of projects you want funded within your business and look to grant funding for those activities. So here's a little journey that many businesses go through. And the reason I wanted to include this slide in today's presentation is because I want to point out that as you move along your business journey, from idea to profitability, there are grants or projects at each stage, right? There are grants for each of these business stages. So you have an idea, maybe there's some funding out there through an incubator or an accelerator, some startup funding that's available through the province of Ontario, and you get a little bit of an infusion of cash to help you ideate. Then you've got an idea. It's time to build a team. That's when hiring grants come in. Then you're trying to prototype what you want to build. Well, to be fair, Pocketed used a lot of hiring grants to prototype. I will share that we built the MVP of our original software in 14 weeks with about 8 grant-funded interns. But there can be money for whether it's people to help you build your prototype or R&D funding, collaborations with universities. Then when you're ready to launch, there are pockets of money that help commercialization. As you need to acquire customers, there's export and expansion funding that can help you with those types of projects. Then hopefully you start accruing revenue, which means your matching capacity for larger grants gets even bigger, and you can go after some of these large-scale growth grants, scale-up opportunities, if you will, that are supported by the government. And that's really what grants are all about, right? They are a beautiful dovetail of business activities and government mandate, whether that's job creation, whether that's economic stimulation, whether that's international export to increase GDP. The government cares about, again, stimulating the economy and making Canada more wealthy. So if you are willing or ready to do projects that can drive economic growth, that's where grants come in. And again, all with that, firework end of profitability, to, again, make Canada and keep Canada, frankly, as a wealthy country. So I'm going to tell you a few stories about a few clients that I have the privilege of supporting. One is a BC-based hardware company. So it's a solo founder, female, who is both innovating in the public safety sector. She's building and manufacturing a life-saving hardware device that's used by search and rescue teams at this point all over the world. And through our engagement with this client, we've ideated a lot of projects, right? So hiring projects, we've helped her add, I think, 2 full-time employees to her team through grants. She's got a manufacturing operation. She needed to increase her manufacturing space. We helped her pursue manufacturing funding here in BC. We also help her recoup costs of her R&D projects through Shred. She also had the benefit of winning a corporate competition. She had a really good news story and won $50,000 in cash from TELUS. So by really focusing on what specific project she was looking for funding for and going to funders who cared about those activities, we've helped her win over $1 million at this point. We work with another company who's on a mission to eliminate single-use plastics. They have some very, very, very cool technology using seaweed as well as wood fiber pulp. And we're currently working with them to pursue close to $10 million in funding. Some of that's through the feds because there's a forestry implication because of the wood fiber input into their technology. Some of the projects are consortium projects, and they're actually advancing the manufacturing sector. So they're hopefully will be working with the supercluster, the manufacturing supercluster. So again, it's not just what's the money for my business? It's what are the projects, what are the partnerships, and what are the outcomes that we can speak to in our grant applications that then the funders care about. We recently, with all of the AI funding, have a new client who we're helping pursue $3.5 million. They are based in Ontario and have a really cool generative AI product. It offers interactive newsletters, lifestyle storybooks. It's an interactive storytelling tool that has been widely used in the real estate sector, but hoping to apply to many, many, many more verticals. And again, this client, through a consulting and grant writing engagement with Pocketed, was able to parse out their various development goals and put forward unique projects to different funders that, again, we hope will yield a $3.5 million government investment in some of their development work. So you hear me talk a lot about activities. We can't underscore this enough. Stop thinking about what your business is and start thinking about what your business wants to do. So many of you are here today, I assume, because you want to build AI. You either have an initial idea, you have some product that you'd like to develop further. So that's going to fall into this beautiful diamond category of R&D. But overall, grants fall largely into these buckets. And again, they all dovetail with government mandate. So are you creating jobs? There's wage subsidies. Are you doing something that is technologically novel, advancing scientific research? Well, then there's money for R&D because it's very important economically, and particularly to stay competitive on a global economic scale, that Canada keeps investing in R&D. So there's lots of money out there for that. If you need to train yourself or train your employees, there's money to make sure that our workforce is upskilled in the form of provincial training grants. Those are available in most provinces. If you are improving sustainability, either through the tech you're building or you just have some sustainability I can't even speak, some sustainability mandates that you want to implement within your business. There are absolutely grants out there for that. Another key category can be equipment purchase. Capital expenditure comes into play a lot with tax credits. If anyone has questions about the clean tech investment tax credits, we can talk about those. There's absolutely a 30% tax incentive to buy clean tech equipment, as well as other clean tech activities. But it definitely is for large scale capital expenditure costs, vehicles, fleets, manufacturing equipment. The other big category of grant is export. So if you've got something that you are selling here in Canada and you would like to sell it in more markets and thus bring more money back into our country, well, there's absolutely a ton of programs and supports that can help you expand internationally. And even for some industries like ag, there can even be provincial expansion grants, depending on where you're at. What's not funded is business as usual. So hopefully the thread that you're hearing me share through all of these project opportunities or project examples is growth, right? So the government doesn't really fund business as usual, routine operational expenses. If you're doing something already, why would they invest in it? They want to see you get bigger, make more jobs, do more for Canada. And so whenever you can position your activities as net new, as incremental, as growth opportunities, that's where funders want to get involved. So that usually doesn't include founder salaries. My tax has some funding that's an exception to that, but typically a founder salary or salaries for your family members, folks who are not at an arm's length from the owners of a company, will not be fundable through grants. That's seen as a conflict of interest. And again, we are taking money from the government, from our shared tax base, so everything does need to be seen as very fair. General business maintenance, debt repayment, purchasing a business, even though entrepreneurship through acquisition is such a big trend these days, but there's not a ton of grants for that. Would love to talk more about that if anybody would ever like to. Personal expenses are not going to be grant fundable. But again, going back here, these are the things that are. And these are the types of things that your bank likely wants to fund through a line of credit or a loan. So again, that's where different sources of capital are so critical when you're baking that cake, if you will, to capitalize your business. It can get overwhelming pretty quick. So Abby and I looked this morning when we came online, and there are 1,819 programs open in Canada today. That's across all levels of government. That includes some corporate funding, some foundation funding, but that's what's open and accepting applications today in Canada. Again, not necessarily, I don't have time to probably look at 18 new websites in any given day, let alone 1,800. This is why we built Pocketed. So when you create your Pocketed account, you share some information about your business. It takes that big database of all the grants in Canada, and it's going to show you the list of the 77 programs that your business is eligible for right now. If you consider the programs that aren't open right now that you're still eligible for, that number will be larger. But on average, we see about 77 matches per company that are open on any given day. But if you're coming to Pocketed because you have a specific mandate that you're looking to fund, a specific project, maybe you want to add some summer hires, maybe you're looking to build or develop AI, if you're bringing that specific project lens to the software, then realistically, there's going to be about 3 programs that are relevant to your business activities. So a really critical thing to understand about grants is the difference between being eligible for a program and actually having it be relevant to your business goals. So getting clarity about those goals, getting clarity about your projects is a really big part of a grant strategy, something that I work with clients to do every day and would be very happy to work with you folks too. So in a nutshell, Pocketed software hopefully makes it easier to find and learn about and apply to the grants that are relevant to your aims. The platform intelligently matches you to your grant matches. And then there are insights within the platform. There's also an easy way to get connected with a service provider if you don't want to DIY your own grant application. But then you apply and hopefully you win. All right, now we're going to jump into some tips about grants. And the big one is to start thinking about grants from day one. For example, we've known that some of this AI funding has been in the pipeline since, realistically this summer, we started hearing actual program names, but it took another 3 to 4 months. Some of the AI funding we're going to talk about has been open in Ontario for 6 weeks, and it just opened this week in British Columbia. So because of the variance between grants from province to province, because of the reality that sometimes your timeline for a project doesn't always match up with a grant's timeline, it's really important to have these things on your radar as soon as possible. So even if you're pre-revenue, even if you're not hiring yet, even if you don't have 6 figures to invest in a massive AI project, learning about these programs now, understanding the partnerships you need to have in place, the payroll practices you need to have in place, the tax practices that you need to have in place to be ready to apply and secure grants is really critical. So we built a cool funding roadmap tool. If you want to take a screenshot of that QR code, I believe the QR code QR codes will also be sent in the follow-up to this webinar. But we built a little self-serve tool that can help you develop your own funding roadmap, make you aware of which programs to keep track of in which seasons, which milestones and traction you need to hit in order to be competitive for certain programs. So I do encourage you to start thinking about and learning about grants at your earliest convenience. To that end, once you're ready to start applying to grants, it's really beneficial to have a dedicated grant champion. So I don't mean me. That's actually tip number 3. I'll come to that in a second. I mean somebody inside your organization who part of their KPIs, who has as a part of their KPIs the commitment to look at your grant strategy and stay on top of the openings and the closings, the reporting requirements if you've won grants. I mean, I'm a grant consultant and a sometimes grant writer, and I have even been at risk of losing a grant for not doing my reporting on time. So having somebody who is accountable to thinking about grants, we did a little deep dive on this stat sometime in September. And we looked at all of our consulting clients that we have on retainer, and those that had a dedicated grants champion, not just a team, even if we always CC the team, but somebody on that team who is accountable, they were securing grants 2x over our other clients who are sort of passing the responsibility back and forth. So really deputizing somebody to work, whether it's solo in your org or with Pocketed, really will increase your success rates when it comes to grants. This is often a founder, a CFO, an HR head, a finance person. These are the types of folks that can be great grants champions for organizations. Leverage experts. So here at Pocketed, I get asked all the time, what do you do? What do you sell? Essentially, we have software, which we are giving away for free to everybody here on this webinar. But we also do grant consulting and we do grant writing. Maybe you are great at writing your own grants, but you don't have time to go out and figure out which are the programs in the next 6 months that should be on your radar. We would love to do that strategic work with you through a consulting engagement. Maybe you've already done that work. You've used the Pocketed tool, you've made your grant list, you know the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 programs that you want to write in 2025, but you don't have the capacity or expertise to write them. We do. We have an amazing network of PhD and PhD level grant writers who would love to collaborate with you. So getting realistic about what your strengths are, where you need advice, where you need execution support, maybe you only need one, maybe you need both, can be really beneficial. All the time I meet people who are like, I just wish I'd hired a grant writer because I'm never getting the applications in. So as we know, you're going to win 0% of the shots you don't take. It can be helpful to work with an expert when you need help on strategy or execution. Build relationships with funders. Seek feedback. This is a really big one, particularly as you start pursuing larger grant programs. Program managers at funders want to see you succeed, right? They're the ones deciding who actually wins the money, and they're accountable both to taxpayers, but also to their organizations and their funders, right? Because often, anyway, all the levels of funding, they want to see you succeed. They want to make sure that the person they're deciding to allocate an award to is going to meet the milestones, is going to deliver the impact that they're promising. And so really building a relationship with funders, understanding what they care about, understanding their thoughts on your business and your project is really critical. The more you do that, the more trust there's going to be. So I would think that the funding awards are going maybe not to increase, but you're going to get the right funding from the right people. And also you can improve if there's a decline. So if you're almost every program has a contact information on the website, send an email. Ask if your project is relevant to the funder. Ask for a 15-minute meeting. If you get declined from a program, absolutely seek feedback and try to understand where you are missing the mark between the mandate of the funder and the project you proposed. Now, this is the type of work we absolutely do with our clients in the background when we are engaged for consulting. But ultimately, those funders want to build the relationship with you, the co-founder, the founder, the CEO, the leadership team. And so it's really critical to create those personal relationships and to nurture them. Okay, we'll bring it full circle. This is a little bit the same as tip one, but it's important to get started, whether it's day one or who knows, maybe you're here with a 10-year-old business and you're just feeling like you have the capacity to think about grants. That's great. Don't wait another 10 years. Don't wait another 10 weeks. These programs come and go very quickly. And so getting started is hard, but hey, kudos to everyone in this room. You got started today. So you're going to have a free pocketed account coming out of this presentation if you don't already. And moving on next, we're going to have some really specific programs that are open right now that can fund AI development or adoption. And we are really happy that you're learning about them and getting started. So lace up, folks. This is an outdated slide. Sorry if anybody wants to only see 3 grants, but usually people are stoked about free money. So I think we're showing you 6 or 7 that are focused on AI right now. So the big one that everyone's talking about, I'm calling it RAI. It's the Regional Artificial Intelligence Initiative, or RAII. So if anybody at the regional development agencies isn't calling it RAI yet, you can say Jamie Proctor Boyce is. So this initiative is federal money that's disseminated through those regional development agencies. So that would be FedDev in Southern Ontario, FedNor in Northern Ontario, Pacific Can used to be WD here in BC. And this is now open in all provinces. I did learn yesterday, I don't think it's open in the territories. They just closed an intake, but maybe reopening soon. But definitely open in all provinces. So this is delivered through ACOA, FedNor, FedDev, CED in Quebec, Prairies Can, and Pacific Can. It's a loan. It's a 0% loan. And there are 2 key streams to this funding where you can request, depending on what province you're in, between I think the minimum ask that I'm seeing is 125K. No, it's actually half of that because that's the project budget. So as little as 75K, I think in Ontario, we can use pocketed to double check. And up to, well, 5 million is the top in Southern Ontario. Thanks, Ben. You're calling out that the link, it is not sending you to it's sending you the homepage because it wants you to set up a pocketed account. And then once you have that, you can check out the program in our software. There's all kinds of cool functionality. You can filter for programs. You can like that program to get alerts if anything changes about it, if it opens, it closes. But yes, all these QR codes are pocketed links, and you do need a pocketed account to view. So this is a 0% loan. There are 2 streams where you can request funding to either commercialize AI that you're building, develop it further, or you can adopt AI if you're a non-AI firm. So most of the, I'm just going to share, these will be right for Ontario. It might be slightly different in other jurisdictions. Funding, you need to have been in business for at least 1 year. Ben, please log into your pocketed account and then it should work. But Abby can DM you if there's a problem. And either way, we can also make sure that everybody gets the links in the follow-up email if for any reason some of the QR codes were off. So back to RAI, or the Regional Artificial Intelligence Initiative. So a 0% loan for projects 1 to 2 years in length. This is open to both for-profits and nonprofits, but I'm going to focus on the for-profit side. You need to be in business at least 1 year and have financials to demonstrate that. You also need to be able to match. This program is a matching fund. So you bring 50% of the funding and the RDA will give the other 50%. I think up to 75%. So if you have IRAP funding, if you have another government grant that you want to stack, I think government funding can be up to 75%. At least that's true in Ontario for the commercialization stream. So you at minimum would need 25% if you're Ontarian. This is a big deal. They're in Ontario, it's going to close. This first intake is closing December 20th. In BC, it's closing January 17th. So now is the time to think about, do I have a 6-figure or 7-figure AI project, whether something I want to adopt into my existing non-AI business or something I want to commercialize through my AI tech company? This grant is made for you. So I'm happy to answer more questions about this one. Thanks, Leslie. You definitely have to be incorporated. And let's just assume that that's kind of table stakes for most grants. There are a few grants where you don't have to be incorporated, but again, at minimum, I think this grant's going to give you 75K. I think in BC, it's a minimum of 250K. These are large scale investments from the government. So you're going to need to show the financial capacity to manage the project, and the impact that it's going to have on your province and the AI ecosystem. This one is a loan. It's a 0% loan. You keep it for the project term, then there's usually a year grace period. And I think with this one, it's probably the same as BSP. You have 5 years to repay it. So it's money you can hold on to for quite a while. I think you do need to have at least one employee, have to have fewer than 500 employees. There's no revenue requirement, but again, you're asking for 6 or 7 figures from the government. You're probably going to need to show that you have, or absolutely going to have to show that you have that matching investment. Yeah, so I'll be happy to answer if people can put their questions in the Q&A, that'd be super helpful. Happy to talk about the venture debt later on. Shred. Hopefully most of you know it and are claiming it. If you're not, let's set up a meeting because we would love to help you prepare your claim and get you back the costs that you've been spending on R&D as far back as 2023. So SHRED, or the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credit, is a non-discretionary program. You do not need to be approved in advance. Rather, if you are building novel technology or advancing scientific knowledge through research, whatever you're spending on those R&D costs can be recouped at a rate of 35 to 65%. Give or take, depending on your province. This is something that you claim annually with your tax return. It is a program that Pocketed supports. It's one that we can do fully on success, so you don't pay us until you get the award from the CRA. And it's a pretty critical one when you're building, when you have a big vision, right? And you're building tech and you need to make a lot of early investment. This is the #1 program that folks are using to keep the fires burning while you're trying to get to market. If folks have questions about SHRED or are looking for a SHRED provider, Pocketed would be super happy to chat. Okay, so there's not a lot of details yet, but IRAP does have a new program. They're calling it AI Assist. So might be similar for those of you that work with IRAP already to IP Assist. So IRAP is sort of the counterpart to SHRED. So SHRED comes from the CRA. Again, it's an entitlement. It's a tax incentive. IRAP is almost like the grant version of this tax credit, but it's a lot more competitive. It is discretionary. You have to really work hard to work. So IRAP stands for the Industrial Research Assistance Program. In order to get funding from IRAP, you need to be assigned an ITA, an Industrial Technology Advisor. These are folks that literally hold the purse strings to this grant funding that is all about supporting technology and innovation in Canada. Increasingly, we see ITAs requiring, definitely in Ontario, more and more in BC, you need to have employees, at least 1 or 2, non-founders, before they're willing to fund you. But the reality is that, everyone wants the attention of their ITA, and it's at their discretion who they're awarding funding to. Pocketed was really lucky, for example. We got an ITA pretty quickly after we were founded. It took almost 18 months before we got any money from that lovely gentleman, who actually has done a great couple of sessions. Some of these webinars, we did an Ask Your ITA session. 2, actually. Send us an email at hello@hellopocketed.io. I can send you the recordings of those IRAP sessions if you'd like to learn more about IRAP. All to say, this is a very competitive funder that you need to build a relationship with, but then they have a ton of supports. They will give you money to hire software developers, to do machine learning collaborations, to do design collaborations. They'll also give you a ton of advice and connections. So they have, for a few years now, had a program called IP Assist. It was about 75% up to 30 grand to help develop your intellectual property strategy. Now AI is becoming a mandate nationally. If you're not noticing all these programs opening. And IRAP will soon be releasing details about AI Assist. We wrote our ITA this week. There are no public details. But if you do have an ITA and you're already connected to your ITA, definitely ask them about AI Assist. That's the party line right now. Just ask your ITA. But again, it will be used to help SMEs, for-profit companies navigate the challenges of developing both Gen AI, generative AI solutions, and deep learning solutions. So awareness, planning, and execution are all things that AI Assist is going to be able to help with. All right. Who knows about the superclusters? These Scale AI, thank you, Abby. We also have a great webinar about the superclusters that was led by Pocketed CTO, Dr. Aria Hahn. She worked on a mining supercluster project, which at the time, through another, not through Pocketed, but through at the time was one of the largest supercluster, was the largest supercluster award at the time it was given a few years ago. A few awards have increased since then. All to say, we would love to send you that recording about superclusters. Just send us an email at hello@hellopocketed.io. These are organizations that support consortiums focusing on critical industries in Canada. So there's a mining supercluster, manufacturing, ocean supercluster, digital. Scale AI is the artificial intelligence supercluster that historically has focused really on like supply chain and logistics, but they most recently are really expanding their focus to consider projects that can help with that, where AI helps along the whole value chain. So, if you are anything when it comes to producing and delivering a product, so supply chain management, if you've got a project that relates to manufacturing process, logistics, demand prediction, or even customer service, anything along that value chain is a project that Scale AI might want to think about. Cherith, please put your question in the Q&A function and I will answer it soon. You do need to be a member of most superclusters to apply, but membership is free. It's only when they give you money do they charge you a little bit of money. So Scale AI, through this industry-led project, it does almost all supercluster applications require a consortium. There was one that just closed with Scale AI. I mentioned we helped a gentleman in Ontario submit for his Gen AI solution. Generally, superclusters offer 40% of the funding. Sometimes we're seeing up to 50%, but you almost always need to go in with a partnership. So that might be one other SME. It might be an academic partner. We're working on a supercluster application right now that has 8 different entities involved. And so with this one partner in the consortium has to be an SME, you. The other partners could be other SMEs, academics, et cetera. But it is really about not just, the project can't just benefit you. It's not just money to build your solution. It's to build solutions that are going to improve the AI value chain across the whole sector. So again, big vision, big dollar amounts as well. Okay, here's a tiny baby one that should be accessible to many people. We love student wage subsidies here at Pocketed. In fact, this is how I got into grants. I helped one of the student work placement program delivery agents build their internship program and funding. So Will Digital is a great way to get young AI talent. You want to go work with, you have some projects that a junior computer scientist or dev could work on. Well, you absolutely should be subsidizing their wages to the tune of 70% every semester that they're working for you and enrolled in school. The best part about student hiring grants is that you can claim them for multiple semesters. So that $7,000 value is the maximum amount you can claim in one semester. But if that student is still working for you the following semester, in many cases, you can request another round of funding. So student work placement program is a great opportunity. Will Digital is one. TechNation is another that's probably relevant to AI hires. Venture for Canada. There's about 24 different delivery agents with different industry focuses, but definitely Will Digital and Career Launcher, no, not TechNation, Career Ready by TechNation. Those are ones that both focus heavily on digital roles for students. If you're an academic or if you are trying to do research with an academic, definitely check out in Pocketed this NSERC collaboration. So there's a new MOU with the US to facilitate collaboration between 2 countries, innovating in the areas of AI and quantum intelligence. It does, the applicant in this case would be a Canadian an eligible university researcher. here in Canada, working with a US counterpart. But again, it's good for SMEs to know that this funding exists because maybe your for-profit entity relies on the research of an academic, and maybe they could further it with this funding. All right, let's see what's next. Great, I'm gonna have a sip of water because I want everybody to take a look at this. The promo code for this webinar is Robo Riches. I love your naming conventions lately, Abby. They're giving me a lot of joy. But if you don't have a Pocketed account, I highly encourage you to set one up today. Go to hellopocketed.io. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a create account link. Share a little bit of information privately about your company, and then we will intelligently match you to all of the grant programs that you're eligible for. And then you can use the filters to figure out which are relevant to your project. So this is about a $475 value annually. We're happy to gift it to folks for free in perpetuity because we know that getting started soon and learning about grants at your earliest convenience means that you're not going to miss opportunities that are really well aligned for your projects. All right, I am going to take a sip of water here and turn it over to Abby to let us know what questions I can answer.
Yeah, so there are some questions in the webinar chat, so I will go to those first, and then I will go to the Q&A function. So thank you for everybody who's been using it. So Leslie Hyman asked, don't you have to be incorporated? You already asked that, answered that. But another question that there was, are there any revenue uh, or employee requirements for the grants or the grant landscape in general?
Yeah, and I'm also just going to call out the question I'm seeing in the Q&A, someone anonymously asked, for most of the grants, I find they're not for pre-revenue businesses. Are there specific grants where pre-revenue businesses can apply? So in some ways, these are all the same question. I'm happy to get more specific if we have time, but generally, what's confusing about grants is that every single one has different requirements, right? So to be fair to Leslie, there are hiring programs where you don't have to be incorporated. You can just be a registered business, or as a solopreneur, sole proprietor. But every grant is different, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands. Some good rules of thumb are that you often do need to have at least one full-time employee, but often fewer than 500, so falling into that SME category. When it comes to revenue, yeah, there are some revenue requirements to specific grants, but more important than pre-revenue companies are getting grants all the time, but they have other capitalization. So, right, remember how I shared there's so many different types of capital that go into building a business? You might not be generating sales yet, but you might have some venture debt, or you might have some equity investment. You might have a line of credit from your bank. You might have done a, friends and family angel round. So depending on what money you have, that's the bigger issue. So all the time people are like, is this grant right for me? And I'm like, how much money do you have to put into the grant? Doesn't have to come from revenue, but you do have to be capitalized to meet the matching requirements. Now, some programs will cover, 75, 80% of project costs, particularly lots of programs, if you're Indigenous owned, they'll cover 100% of grants. There's some grants that are for nonprofits and for-profits, but for the nonprofit, 100% of costs are covered. For the for-profit, only 50% of the costs. So I think the better question is, how capitalized are you? That being said, there are programs like Can Export where you have to have $100,000 in declared revenue to be eligible. The now defunct CDAP program required $500,000 in revenue. So again, it's a really hard question for all grants, but I would definitely not exclude yourself from grants if you're not revenue generating. Yeah, so I'll pause there.
The next question we have is from Sumati, asking about the Regional AI Initiative. What is the projected start date? Is there any other information available on the application process? And they were just wondering because they saw the Can Export process took a little while. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say in these sessions, and I'll answer Joyce's question next because I kind of think they're connected too, just about Ray. But these programs, I always say in these sessions, you know how when you're like looking for a contractor to do a project at your house and you can say you can have good, fast, or cheap, pick two. Grants are good and they're cheap, but they're not fast, which is why we can never underscore enough that you need to start early. And so the stated timeline, I'm just going to again go with Ontario, is that you need to apply by December 20th. You can start incurring costs, but you're at risk that they might not be. You can start incurring costs as of December 20th on the AI project. But I don't think you'll likely get a decision probably until March. I mean, by comparison, the same funder was offering another 0% loan through the formerly called Business Scale Up and Productivity Program. They were welcoming applications in September, and they have a big old notice on their website that says they're behind in assessing applications. Because of the macroeconomic climate, grants are competitive and there's a surge in applications for many programs. People are looking for money everywhere, which means absolutely it can be a waiting game. And there's some risk, right? You could start incurring costs, but then not actually be able to have them reimbursed in the end if you were not successful with the grant application. So I think it's important with grants, again, to remember that they can't start runway for you. You've got to have some runway, whether that's from investment, from your bank, from your customers, and then see grants as a way to add some fuel to that fire. That being said, with Joyce's question, you're saying we have venture debt that stipulates they must be the first lien. So for other folks, what Joyce is asking is that she's interested in Ray. It's a loan. And she has some investors that are demanding they be repaid first over other debt sources. That can absolutely be a negotiation with FedDev. So do not prevent you from applying to Ray. And Joyce, if you are considering an application, super happy to chat about grant writing support. Definitely, it's due pretty soon in BC and Ontario. We have seen with our clients that the RDAs, these regional development agencies like FedDev and Pacific Can, will negotiate the terms if they like your project. So they actually even ask in the initial application where you disclose all of the different financial, the matching contributions that you're going to show the documentation for. They actually invite an explanation of whether they're pending, whether they're dependent on the RDA giving you the money for it to unlock that investor's contribution. So definitely, if you have even, I would say, a tentative term sheet, you should be considering this funding, and happy to talk more explicitly in a one-on-one. I think that was a question in the general chat, like how do we get help from Pocketed? So I'm happy to break that down a little bit. Again, the software is free, but it is totally self-serve. So I do want to be really transparent that one-on-one support is a paid service, but obviously I'm not going to ask you to, take out your credit card without a little bit more conversation. So you're really welcome to send a email to us at hello@hellopocketed.io. Ideally, you have your Pocketed account set up so we can see a little bit more information about your business. But we're happy to set up a quick introductory call to understand, do you need a grant strategy session? Do you need ongoing fractional support on the consulting and strategic side? Do you just need grant writing for a specific project and want a quote for that? So really the question is, do you want us to find grants for you? If you're having a human in the loop, that is a paid service and there's different levels of engagement. Or do you just need us to grant write a program that you found? There's fees for that as well, but sometimes we can do that fully on contingency. So lots of different ways to work with Pocketed, whether you need consulting help, strategy help, and or grant writing help. And if you are looking for paid services, feel free to flip us an email and we'd be happy to get on a call. Beyond that, if you're not ready to pay, that's okay. Absolutely use the Pocketed software. There are tons of grant writer insights about these programs in the tool. And so if you don't have money, but you maybe need to use some of your own time to build your grant strategy, the Pocketed software is a great way to organize the grants that you're considering, get grant writer intel on those programs, and then, link out to the exact program sites where you can get the nitty-gritty directly from the funder. All right, I'll pause there. I hope I answered all of those questions.
Yes. So the next question that we have, and we can actually merge these a little bit together because you did speak about it. Does Scale AI force you to join an incubator? And then Sumati is asking also, and I know you've answered this before, do all partners need to be Canadian?
Okay, great questions. So I think there's a few in there. Um, I will say that so with Scale AI, that's a supercluster. It's not an incubator. In order to apply to most supercluster funding, you do need to become a member, but it's free. So it's like ngen.ca/membership. It's Scale AI join. Like they're just free member organizations. Sometimes, so in most cases, I may be mistaken, but most in all of the projects I've worked on, you don't have to pay the supercluster anything until you're awarded. Most supercluster grants are very transparent in the beginning, that they take like 3 to 5% of your grant that you win back as an administrative fee for their support of the project. So that's something that we can talk about once there's a grant writing engagement, but you don't have to be a member of an incubator for the supercluster programs, but you do have to be a member of the supercluster. In Ontario, for example, there's a couple programs through OCI, the Ontario Centre for Innovation, that are only open to people who have come from an incubator and are like an academic spin out. So sometimes you do need to have an incubator or accelerator background to your business for like a handful of funds. These are also all tips that you can learn about in the pocketed software. So the coolest part about, I think, because I use it every day, is that like your mind kind of turns to mush when you're looking at different funders' websites, and like you sometimes have to download things, and it's like, there's 1,800 different open data sources right now. With Pocketed, it's all standardized. It's like, what's the program about? What's it going to fund? What's your matching contribution? So it makes it really easy to learn about these programs, and that membership piece would be pretty explicit in those entries in the Pocketed tool. Sorry, remind me of the second part of the question. I apologize.
Do all partners need to be Canadian?
Yes, great question. So not necessarily, but only Canadian partners can usually claim the funding when you're in consortium grants. So if you're like, my project is going to be so much more competitive if I can demonstrate how I have this US partner and they're going to be doing knowledge sharing with me, that's great, but they're not going to actually be able to claim any of the grant themselves. So if you want money, yes, you do need to be Canadian. And this is sort of a theme across all types of grants, supercluster consortium grants, hiring grants, right? All the time, people are so excited to make a hire, and then they, through one of these student work placement programs, and then they learn, oh no, I wanted to hire an international student. That's not allowed. So most hiring grants can only go to Canadian citizens and permanent residents. Same for most training grants. It's a bummer in many cases, especially in the academic landscape, because there's so many amazing international folks here doing their studies, doing their research, wanting to contribute to Canada. And I think many wanting to make a home here and do some workplace attachment. So all to say, those are some of the bummers about grants. On the international student side, I will share that my tax will fund international students. And there's a cool program, I think it's through SFU. It would be in the database where they have some funding for Vancouver-based internships with international students. So there's increasingly a few exceptions to this. But for the most part, when you're thinking about grants, you want to think about the benefit to Canada. And to this question, you also want to think about the fact that the beneficiaries need to be Canadian as well. I think we maybe have time, yeah, for one more.
Yes. So we can just go into the Q&A because I answered Amna Abdullah's question. Um, let's just find a
Yeah,
great question.
I can try to cruise through these. So I'll start at the bottom. Yeah, hiring grants. Someone asked, can you hire someone outside of Canada? No. And that's the same with that SHRED program that I was sharing. It's for R&D done in Canada. So if you're subcontracting to some of your development work to Hungary or India or Ukraine, unfortunately, those costs are not going to be recoupable. That's the same with hiring grants. This is our taxpayer money, folks, right? So we're looking to stimulate opportunity and growth here in our country through grants. And so those are great great questions and great things to be mindful about. It's 4:30 here in Nova Scotia. I don't know if you guys can tell, but usually we do these webinars a little earlier in the day, and I think maybe that's good for me. Someone's asking, is CanExport open now? And I know somebody else asked a little bit about CanExport. So that wasn't one of the programs we talked about, but CanExport SMEs is an amazing program. It's industry agnostic. So any of you on this call who have declared at least $100,000 in revenue should be considering it for your international business development activities, right? I don't care what your business is. I want to know, what do you want to do? You want to expand into France or India or Hungary or Ukraine? Well, then you probably want to travel to those places. You want to go to trade shows. You want to buy digital marketing in those territories. CanExport will defray costs 50%. So you can request, you can put together a project of up to $100,000 and request $50,000, half of it, in funding. This program is only open once a year. You can request funding for 1 to 2 years in advance. This is why you need to get started soon, get started early. CanExport is not open yet, but we are writing these grants now. Past couple of years, it's opened in February, and it has been very competitive. There was a question in the Q&A where people are reporting waiting 6 to 9 months for a decision from CanExport. I'm seeing more like 5 to 6 months, but the service standard is supposed to be 2 months. Only those folks that were applying at the front of the queue last year got prompt decisions. So if you would like us to help you grant write this program, which has become very competitive, I'm really happy to share some tips and tricks about what we learned last year of how to succeed with this program. If you'd like to do a grant writing project, I really encourage a grant writer for CanExport, even if you've written it in the past yourself. They're doing so many more checks on an application. I can share those one-on-one. And so I do encourage a grant writer. I do encourage preparing that submission now so that we can help you get it in as soon as the portal opens later in the winter. I do know there's some questions for nonprofits. I will say that some of this AI funding is available for nonprofits. Unfortunately, the question is, we're a nonprofit organization in Alberta. Is there anything off the shelf that we can consider at the moment? I will give a plug for one program before we say goodbye, but first I'll just share, unfortunately with nonprofits, it's even more complex, because not only do you need to consider government funding, corporate funding, but there's also tons of foundation funding and family offices that are less discernible who are giving away money. So happy always to do a one-on-one paid consultation or fractional engagement with nonprofits. I personally do a lot of that. But there are so many different programs out there depending on your projects and their stages, and again, what your budgets are looking like. That being said, another program that everyone should have on their radar is Canada Summer Jobs. And that program for nonprofits covers 100% of minimum wage for anybody that starts working with you, in April, May of this year. So it covers up to 16 weeks of employment. They can stay on longer, but the longer part wouldn't be subsidized. It's to hire Canadian citizens or permanent residents, ages 15 to 30. There's some question of whether that money will be allocated in Alberta, because the provincial government there is not signing the federal transfer to get that federal funding. But again, the pocketed tool might have some deets on that soon. But that's absolutely one. For for-profits, it covers 50% of minimum wage for summer hires up to 16 weeks. Previously, there was better funding for folks 30 and under through Digital Skills for Youth or Green Jobs or Science Horizons. That money doesn't exist right now, and it will not be coming back until at least April, May of 2025. So if you are considering hiring someone 30 or under, or many people this summer, consider Canada Summer Jobs, even if you didn't in the past. That's another one that's gotten really competitive. It's like a hefty application. You have to tie your project to your MLA's mandates. It's one that we offer really low-cost grant writing support on. So if you're interested in Canada Summer Jobs grant writing support or CanExport grant writing support, flip us an email at hello@hellopocketed.io. I'm going to pause now because we are on a break. We're at time.
Time.
But I want to thank everyone for showing up and for your amazing questions. The big takeaway from this session is that AI, whether you are building tech yourself or you want to hire an AI firm to build AI for your own business that is not an AI firm, there's money out there. And so do set up your free pocketed account. We will be sending out the program names and the recording of this session, as well as the code to redeem Pocketed. So stand by for that email either today or tomorrow. And congrats to each and every one of you for getting started. You are definitely advancing your grant strategy by attending today's session. I look forward to meeting some of you one-on-one if you'd like to talk about paid support for Shred, for consulting, for Can Export. And thank you. Thank you for being an entrepreneurship. Thank you for being an entrepreneur. Thanks for creating jobs. Thanks for doing your part to advance innovation and economic development in Canada. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.